Hey folks, it's Mr. Fly here, hope you're well, and welcome to another bike review on this absolutely glorious day. Today, very happy to be riding another Harley-Davidson. This I think is the third Harley-Davidson I've ever ridden. This is the Softail Standard that I'm on. It's a sort of a fairly back to basics, bobber-esque style bike. Anyway, if you stick around and stay tuned, I'll tell you what I think of it. So the Softail Standard then, quite a different Harley to others that I've ridden. It's got all the usual Harley attributes, you know, big engine, thumpy nature, over-engineered, all that kind of stuff. You kind of either get Harleys or you don't. I've decided now on my third Harley, I definitely get them. It's all about how these things make you feel, and this one makes you feel cool AF, I have to say. But it is a relatively basic bike. There's no fancy riding modes, or doesn't even have traction control. But what there is great. So let's go through all the basics as I normally do on these reviews. Starting off with comfort. Well, this bike has got quite an unusual riding position in that it's got these sort of mini 8-hanger bars. First time I've ever ridden with handlebars of that type, and I didn't think I was going to get on with them very well. But I have to say, actually, I find the handlebars very, very comfortable, and actually in terms of control it feels absolutely fine. I think I wouldn't get on with the proper 8-hangers, you know, the ones that are really high up, but these ones feel really comfortable. But then I've only been riding the bike for the last 20 minutes. Maybe after an hour or two perhaps your arms will get tired, but I don't think so. I think the handlebars are absolutely great, so no worries there, and they do look cool. The seat itself is nice and padded in the usual Harley way, so the seat is comfortable. There's only room for one on here, no pillion perch, so it's only going to be a solo ride on the Softail. But it's comfy, got a little bit of a backrest that gives your, you know, coccyx a bit of a nudge. But because you are quite upright, and it is of course a cruiser, I suspect over a longish period of time it would get uncomfortable. I found that before on this style of bike where your back can start to ache a bit, so I suspect this would be no different. But the seat itself is nice and padded. The foot pegs, I'm glad to say, are what Harley would say mid-set. I mean, they still feel more forward than other foot pegs that I'm used to on other bikes. But you know, your feet aren't paddling out way out front. You don't have to sort of wave your feet around in front of the bike to find them when you first get on. They are in quite a natural position. So actually the riding position I find okay, and it is comfortable for short blasts, but the jury's out on longer runs. Oh, handles are lovely on these corners. So yeah, so let's talk about handling. It's again fairly basic bike in terms of suspension, just telescopic forks at the front and a single shock at the back. No adjustability really, except for preload on the rear. But it feels actually quite flickable around these corners. It's surprising because it's a heavy bike, just under 300 kilograms curb weight. Once you're moving like all these heavy bikes, you never know that it's heavy. It only becomes an issue when you're moving the thing around at home. I tend to find that with these heavier bikes, just to be safe, when I'm moving them around in the garage and on the driveway, I do it with me sat on the bike, and that way you're less likely to drop it. That's just because I'm a bit of a wimp. But it's got a very low seat height on here, so for a shorty like me, I'm 5'8", I can easily get my feet flat on the deck, in fact with a bend in my legs, which means the weight at standstill is fairly easy to manage if you're sat on the bike, as I say. I guess the downside of that low seat height is if you are a tall person, a 6-footer, you might feel a bit cramped on here. The mirrors on here work really lovely. They're these little short Harley-Davidson stubby numbers that I've seen before on the previous bikes I've ridden. And they work really well. A little bit of vibration, nothing terrible. I can see the car behind me quite clearly. Nice, sir, Mr. Goldwing. Which does actually lead me on to that vibration thing. Of course, it's a Harley-Davidson, it vibrates. That's part of their charm. When you're riding along, it's at such low RPM, the vibrations aren't, they're not annoying vibrations, they're not tingly ones that'll get on your nerves and give you pins and needles in your hands, that sort of thing. They just let you know that you're on a big motorcycle, and I like that. Talking of big motorcycle, it has of course a big engine. It's got that Milwaukee 8 engine in it, almost 1800cc, same engine as I rode in the Fat Boy, the last Harley I rode, and then before that the Breakout. I think they had the same engine as well, so fairly familiar with this engine. It's a lovely unit actually. Makes a great noise. It's quite muted on here. It is Euro 5 friendly, this bike, so it has to pass all the emissions and noise regulations. It's got a lovely note to it, but I suspect if you bought one of these, you'd probably want to do something with the exhaust to give it a bit more volume. I certainly would. But as standard, you might be able to hear it. It's got a nice low rumble to it. Definitely sounds like a Harley. I'll go through all the detailed specs in a minute when we do the walk around in the usual way and show you the engine. One of the things I have noticed about this version of the engine is that it's finished in sort of brushed aluminium as opposed to chrome, whereas the other Harleys I rode with that engine were very much more blingy and were chromed out. But as I say, I'll show you those details when we do the walk around. Let me just try the brakes. Front brake actually works okay, nice and progressive. It doesn't have much initial bite. Let's just try that again. But it stops you absolutely fine. And the rear brake, well, pretty much nothing there. The rear brake's not very good. It's alright, I guess, for keeping the bike stable through corners, that sort of thing, which is why you use the rear brake on these cruisers, really. But yeah, let's just try that again. Yeah, no, you have to stamp on it quite hard to have any effect, but that's not unusual. Many motorcycles are like that with a rear brake. It's the front one that matters most in terms of stopping power, of course, because that's where all your weight's transferred to. No, it's a really lovely ride, actually. Of the 3 Harleys I've ridden so far, even after this short ride, I think I can honestly say this is the nicest I've been on in terms of its feel of riding. It doesn't feel so ponderous as the Fat Boy, which of course is a big old bike. Lovely, I have to say, but big and slightly ponderous on the corners. This is much more agile on the corners. I mean, it handles better in the corners than the Breakout did, for example. I don't know if the rake is less. The Breakout is almost chopper-esque in its raked out front. This one not so, and it definitely reflects in the handling, which is really nice, actually. Well, I think what I'll do for a change is I'll go up to Wendover Woods, which is just up here. I've been up here before on the channel, but it's a lovely sort of recreation area. It's a lovely summer's day. As you can see, I'm recording this in late July. It's about 24 degrees, just perfect riding weather. So I'll pop up there to do the walk around, and then when we come back, we'll come back down this bypass, see what she's like on faster roads. See, it stands still, bent legs, very easy to hold the bike upright, no feeling of danger that you're going to drop it. All the controls on here, typical Harley-Davidson, massive clutch and brake levers that feel properly, you know, hewed out of solid blocks of metal. I'm sure they're not, but that's how they feel. Everything feels over-engineered on here. That's part of the charm. It's got indicators on either side, which actually I quite like, and the self-cancelling indicators on Harleys just work really well. You have to sort of learn to trust them, but they always do work, in that they do cancel at the right time. I like that. And the switchgear is all very simple and basic, because there's not much on the bike, as I say, to have to handle. And I like that, actually. Sometimes I just think simple is best. It's a bit of a breath of fresh air to be on a bike that's not so laden with electronics. Yeah, when I first saw the bike, I didn't know whether I'd get on with it, because as I say, the handlebars looked a bit intimidating. But actually I'm well impressed, both from the comfortable feel of it, at least on a short ride, and then the way it feels dynamically. Yeah, big thumbs up from me. Alright, so I've just come through Wendover. The woods are up here. I'll find a quiet-ish spot in the car park if I can. It's school holidays at the moment, it might be quite busy. And I'll show you around the bike. Okay, so welcome to the car park at Wendover Woods, a lovely little local beauty spot. Highest point in the Chilterns, by the way. Anyway, before I get off and show you the bike and talk you through the spec, I just want to show you the dash, if that's the right word, on here. Very simple little LCD display on here, look. It's got a proper fuel gauge, I'm glad to say. It has a gear position indicator and the Odo. There's a button here that allows you to cycle through the various functions, so the odometer, the trip counters. We've got the distance remaining, the clock, RPM that comes up digitally, not much use, and that's it. But that's all you need, basically, and I'm pleased to see it's got a proper fuel gauge, as I say. And down here you've got your idiot lights. At the moment you can see we're in neutral, so I really like that. Really simple, just sort of works. Anyway, let's kill her for the moment. It is keyless, by the way, which is nice. Actually, we'll just leave it properly off. The stand on here has got one of those clever Harley stands where you put it down and it sort of locks. feels like it's going to go over a long way, and then it locks into a little notch underneath the engine or the frame somewhere. It means the bike won't roll forward with the stand down. Very clever. Alrighty, there we go. So let me show you this. The Harley Softail Standard. Here we go. As I say, it's meant to be a sort of a basic bike as the start, if you like, for customisation if you want. And one of the big things, I guess, the difference with this over the other Harleys I've ridden is that it's got a bit of a lack of bling. On this side, yes, we've got the chrome exhaust pipes, but the rest of it is not quite as blingy as those other bikes I've ridden. The Fat Boy, for example, which was covered in chrome. If you look at the engine casing on this side, for example, this is like a brushed aluminium as opposed to chrome. There's quite a lot of blacked out areas. It's not so much in your face. It's very low key, you know, the way it says Harley-Davidson on the tank and so on. Only available in this black colour as well, so you can kind of take it from here. Anyway, let me get the phone out and I'll talk you through the spec in the usual way. Okay, here we go then. The Harley-Davidson Softail Standard. Let's have a closer look at it, shall we? Talk you through the spec in the usual way. Let's start off with the main event, which is this engine, the Milwaukee 8, as I mentioned. 1746cc if you're European, but if you're American, it's 107 cubic inches, sorry. Air-cooled V-twin, of course, and this one, Euro 5 compliant. Puts out around 86 brake horsepower, but don't let that fool you, because at no point in riding this bike have I felt that this bike is underpowered, because it has masses of torque, 144 newton meters of torque, a very low 3,250 RPM. That's what these Harleys are all about. Because they're so low revving, that's why you don't get the high power figures, but you do get that high torque number. 107 pounds-feet of torque if at 3,250 RPM if you're in the old money. It certainly feels a strong bike. One of the things that surprised me about this is the brakes. If you take a look, only a single disc on here, even though it's a heavy bike at just under 300 kilograms. We'll get to that in a minute. Lovely wheels in here, lovely spoke wheels, but we can see the brakes, single disc, 300mm disc, and a 4-part Harley-Davidson branded caliper that I think is actually made by Brembo for Harley. Even though that doesn't look adequate for such a big heavy bike, it feels fine. It feels really good actually. So yeah, brakes on the front are fine. On the back, as I mentioned, at the moment doesn't feel too good. Maybe it's because it's a relatively new bike. Here we go, there's a rear brake, just a 2-pot caliper on there and a smaller single disc. But the brakes overall absolutely fine, do the job surprisingly well actually. Suspension on here, on the front, nothing complicated. Normal fork, it's I think it's a 50mm telescopic fork on the front, no adjustment. On the rear it's got a single shock, which is just adjustable for preload, although I can't even see it. Should have looked at this before I started the camera. It's under there somewhere. It's called a Softail because it's obviously hidden, because it's supposed to look like a hardtail. They've done a good job because I can't see where the shock is, but there we go. There is one hidden in there somewhere. Seat height on here, I mentioned it was very low, 680mm. Very comfortable seat. Let's come around and show you. I love this sort of ribbed effect that they've got on here. No passenger provision, of course, so no rear foot pegs or anything like that. But does say lovely and low seat, so even though it's heavy, you don't feel like you're going to drop it when you come to a standstill. The weight really only comes out when you're moving it around your driveway, as I say. The weight, actually curb weight, 297 kilograms is the curb weight of the bike. The fuel tank on here, lovely looking thing, and I love the low-key Harley-Davidson graphics on it. Holds 13.2 litres, claimed 43 miles per gallon, so you should have a range of around about 130 miles. So no long distance tour of this, of course. This is a cruising machine for Sunday briefish rides, I guess, up to 130 miles between fill-ups. Electronics, nothing much to talk about. It does have keyless ignition, which I'm always in two minds about. And on here, it's one of those ones where it only works with ignition. It's not a lockable fuel tank. If you want to lock the steering, then you have to use the key for that down here. So that's a bit strange and a bit odd because it hasn't got much else in the way of electronics. It's got LED lights all round, or LED headlight I should say. It's got that LCD instrument cluster that I showed you before, which is just here, and you know, works really well. That's pretty much it. Self-cancelling indicators, basic ABS, no traction control or riding modes or anything like that, and actually I think the bike's all the better for it. Price wise then, the big one comes in at $12,995, which is quite a lot of money for a basic bike when you compare it to things like the Triumph Bobber, which is a few £100 less and much more sophisticated, certainly from an electronics point of view. Makes this sound quite expensive. At the moment this is the cheapest bike in the Harley lineup because they stopped the Sportster back in 2020 I think, although that's coming back again. I know they've recently announced the Sportster S, which is slightly more expensive, but the Sportster S will be the sort of top of the line model, so cheaper versions may come out, I don't know. But at the moment, when I record this in July, this is the cheapest Harley you can buy. Anything else to tell you about? Well, it's only available in black. If you want to spend some more money, you can spend an extra £3,500 on the Screaming Eagle Stage 4 kit, and that'll give you over 2000 cc and 120 bhp. But as I say, it's not a bike that I felt needed more power. Alright, there you go, that's the spec. Let's jump on and ride us some more. Alrighty then, let's get this show back on the road. Let me just show you the sort of start-up procedure, if you like. On these, you bring it to life by pressing this button, and then the little display comes to life. As I say, I've got the key fob in my pocket, and then you press that one to starter. And the usual Harley rock and roll, which I absolutely love. It's all part of the character of these things, isn't it? Alrighty, let's make our way out of the car park here then, just see what she's like slow speed handling. Just in first, nice and slow. Not bad actually, I have to say, pretty damn smooth. I mean, it's a big old thumpy V-twin, but slow speed, lovely and balanced. I'm doing a indicated 9 miles an hour, and it's certainly nowhere near the sort of snatchiness that you'd expect of a big old lump like this. Alright, let's make our way out of here then. Let's just talk about the gearbox and the clutch. As I mentioned before, one of the things I like about Harley-Davidsons is that they're just so over-engineered. They're made, you can tell they're made by big burly blokes with spanners, and I like that about the bikes. And the gearbox adds to that whole feeling. You have to be quite positive with it. Having said that, I've only had, I think I've had one false neutral in the time that I've been riding the bike, and that's just because I'm getting used to it. But in the main, I've found the gearbox to be absolutely fine. And the clutch, even though it's got that massive clutch lever I talked about, which I like, so, you know, it's positive. It's not that heavy. It's not that heavy at all. It's not, I wouldn't describe it as light either. It's sort of in between, but it's absolutely fine. They're not adjustable, the levers, and they are quite big and they are quite far away. So if you had small hands, you might have a problem. But I find them absolutely fine. A few speed bumps to negotiate here. Must just take this opportunity while we drift out of the woods to thank Harley-Davidson UK for making the bike available to me to test. Very kind of them. I have to say, I've thoroughly enjoyed riding it. I mentioned earlier that maybe the Triumph Bobber is the obvious competition to me for this bike. I can't think of much else. And having ridden the Bobber extensively, and I do like that bike, it is a lot more sophisticated. It's a different sort of bike. Given the choice between the two, and there's similar pricing, there's a few £100 between them, this is slightly more expensive, I would take this over the Bobber. It just somehow feels more authentic to me. I've often said this, when you get these manufacturers that sort of own a genre, so for example, you could argue BMW own the large tradie sector with the GS. Why would you buy something else that was a sort of a copy of a GS when you could have the real thing? And it's the same with these cruisers. Why would you buy something that's a copy of a Harley? And I know Triumph would argue they're not copying Harley, because I suppose Triumph are the next brand that's maybe the next most authentic in that market. Certainly of the European brands. But yeah, if you're after a cruiser bike that makes you feel good with a big thumpy V-twin engine, then why not buy a Harley? I mean, you know, that's what they do. That's what they're good at. So yeah, I would have the Harley over the Bobber personally. But that's just me. Ride them both, make your own mind up. Oh, what a beautiful day for a ride through the woods, eh? Right, I'm going to go and find the Wendover bypass, wander up a bit, see what she's like on a faster road. Alrighty, so we're just coming up to Wendover bypass up here. A little bit of a faster road. Now, of course, the Harley isn't a sports bike, so I'm not expecting it to be like, you know, a ballistic missile, but I'm just interested in things like wind blast, stuff like that, whether it's turbulent at a slightly higher speed. So let's get onto the faster road and give that a whirl. I have to say, I love the lazy characteristic of this engine. Here I am doing 60 miles an hour in 5th gear, and the engine is just purring along. It's under no stress at all. That is the joy of these big, lazy, high torque engines. Superb. You don't really need to drop it down gears, but I'm going to anyway, just because I enjoy changing gear on this. Lazily around this big sweeping corner. Right, I'll get her into 6th, which is sort of almost like an overdrive on this bike. Here we are then, I'm on a 60 mile an hour road. I'm doing 60 miles an hour exactly, and the airflow is nice and smooth. No horrible turbulence. Even though I'm wearing a helmet with a camera on the side and stuff, it's nice to smooth the airflow. No problem at all at higher speeds. And also, I'm not feeling, oddly enough, I'm not feeling like I'm really having to hang on. I've just crept up to 65 miles an hour now, indicated. And I don't know if it's because of the riding position or what, but I don't feel like I've got loads of pressure on my chest. Right, let's overtake this bit of traffic. Bit of a problem with my camera moving in the wind blast, but no problem with me. Yeah, don't get put off by that seemingly low horsepower figure. There is no lack of power in this beast, I can assure you. Lovely job. Oh, a bit of a traffic jam. What's going on here? Oh, horrendous. Alright, good time to wrap it up then. So that's it. That's my review of the Harley-Davidson Softail Standard. By some margin, my favourite Harley-Davidson to date. Completely non-intimidating to ride. Comfortable. Well, at least on shorter journeys. Jury's out for longer ones. A joy to ride. Handles better than it looks. Is a little bit heavy, but that's really not a problem. And also maybe a little bit expensive for the spec sheet, but yeah, a joy to ride, and by far my favourite Harley-Davidson so far, as I say. Really enjoyed that. So that's it for this time. Hope you enjoyed that ride on the Harley. I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until next time, this has been the Mr. Flyer. Cheerio.